All right, so Mick is a colleague here at Manchester Metropolitan University and in the Faculty of Health and Education, working on the project-based units. Mick's currently completing a PhD that involves families exploring cultural and ecological issues of and coding platform games together. So I'm going to hand over to Mick to talk about it.
Okay, so just to ask for a little bit of audience participation during this. Can you think in your mind, what is the sound of you cheering? You don't have to do this, but as this is in your mind, it's pretty low kind of like participation. Is anyone a woo? Is anyone a yeah? Is anyone a wah? Okay. Next slide, I'm going to ask for 2 cheers. I'm going to go like that, and you can make that noise or not. Okay, it's up to you. But I think you'll probably feel better. We're getting, you know, towards the end of the afternoon. If you just like low-key cheer, you can actually pitch it the level you want. It's totally up to you. You can make the sound you thought of, or you could experiment with a new sound. See how that feels. Oh, okay. So using gameplay, a design pattern collection, a whole pattern of different designs that people could put in a game as a resource, as a way of getting novice game coders started, kind of kickstarting a community rather than starting from zero, or giving them a set of instructions to follow step by step. You know, kind of, it's a collection of different things you can add to it. So that's what this talk's about. And this is kind of, do you know what? This is my recent project, and it's a repair and making workshop in Todmorden that got set up after lockdown. And I wish I could talk about that, because it's all about reuse of stuff and like remaking things. Sort of like people in recovery use it. It's a good project. But this is about games, so I can't really. We do some game making there, but it's mostly kind of repair and making. But the good thing about this was that this is in Todd College. That was like a vocational skills-based college that got run down. But then, when they were going to turn it into a little car park, the community banded together, took over, got it transferred from the local authority. It is now controlled by the people of Todmorden. Pretty good, that. And then within it, this is a space for people to come in. It's like a members-run organisation. People can use it for various purposes. Here we've got how to learn how to like do repairs, and here we've got a bit of kind of after-school game making, and it's a great success. Yay! There you go. Works, doesn't it? Energized. It's good. So anyway, this all came about from my work doing outreach work in the university. We did a lot of stuff with home ed families, because they can come in while the students are there. So you've got that kind of like not having to do after school stuff or stuff at the weekends. So they're really super useful for that. And also they're up for the experiences. One of the things that I did was run a consultation. What do you want as home ed families? And surprise, surprise, the parents and the kids wanted to somehow leverage their interest in games to learn other stuff. Like particular parents thinking, yeah, coding, well, I don't know how to do it, it's a speciality. You do something in your university. So that kind of, I was interested in learning how to code, but I'd never done it with games before. Wasn't even particularly interested in games, but it kind of led me down the path of rediscovering like a love for games. Got 2 childhood games I used to love. Phoenix, both shoot 'em ups. It's kind of 1980 kind of games. Phoenix, kind of a bit like Galaxians, about the same time. And Moon Cresta, used to love those games. And I thought it made me think where I was. There was one in like this like weird shop down the end of the road. There was like a barber shop. And then there was another one in like a supermarket that we used to visit in France to go buy cheap booze. I was gutted when they swapped that for Frogger, although I like Frogger now, but at the time I was gutted. And there's a really interesting book, Michael Newman. It's like the Atari Age, chapter 1 documents the kind of shift of perception. Like, so coin-operated amusements were represented in popular media from the 1930s to 70s as a diversion for low lives and a trade under the control of criminals with crooked politicians in their pockets. It's a really great sort of chapter that then charts how it kind of changed a bit from like sort of, yeah, these kind of like 70s male working class, kind of marginal, sort of dusty arcades, to the early 80s. They started to clean up their act a bit, put them in shopping malls, although only a third were still in shopping malls at that time. And then later in the 80s, the kind of push to make video games more family friendly fun. So that's an interesting chapter. And here's one in the UK. And I think I'd love to read something similar about the kind of perceptions and kind of the kind of sociology of those kind of arcades or where these machines were in the UK, because I think it's a little bit different. Like seaside towns. There's one in like Flea Pit Cinema in the bottom where in my town. I was not allowed to go there. I could go and play on building sites, but I was not allowed to go there. So that kind of like slightly dodginess is like it's like the first subculture. You know, many others, you know, existed, but that was like one. So in terms of a research process, we're going to draw into communities of practice, all the good sort of socio-cultural stuff, community of learners, participatory design, and then tapping funds of knowledge. So this idea of like arcade games, game playing, as something kind of previous experiences that we can draw on for learners to reuse and kind of leverage for motivation, but it also, I think, for some of the well, I'm going to say mechanics, but we'll get onto that. Some of the mechanics of what makes a game is something that this study explores. And I'm just going to go into the specifics of design, game design patterns. So from that, this is what the game making process looked like with families, and then moving towards, after like 5 or 6 weeks, like a showcase to students in the building, or like putting it into like kind of like consoles, either ones that were made out of wood, or these guys even made their own out of cardboard with their own branding. It's pretty good skills. It kind of started off also using textiles to map out a 2D platformer just to really accelerate the prototyping process. And actually use this, this ended up being the basis, like a 2D retro platformer. So, just going to skip forward a little bit to another bit of interaction. It's interesting how much, Mario, 2D retro platforms come up today. It's like it's like something that's ingrained. Most people know what's going on pretty much. If you were, and I'm just going to skip a little bit here to show you. Oh, it's hard to see this. How do I do a different tab?
If you hit escape, that will happen.
Oh, tell me, minimize it. All right, so here's like a template that I start with, and it's called like a half-baked game or a crap game. Look how slow that is. I'm not, yeah, okay, so it's a crap game or half-baked game. There's things you're going to want to change. There's things you're going to want to add to this to make it your own. And that's what I do with the young people and the families. And they pretty much know stuff. But I'm going to want to test it out with you. What would you, as a 10-year-old, or you now, want to add to that game? So if you've got like a phone, could you do like a QR code, scan it in, it'll take you to a Padlet, and try and divide it, if you can, self-regulating in a self-regulating way. Try and divide your, these are not really themed, but can you just try and add in different things that you would add to the game, different features, different elements? Oh yeah, of course. So you're getting there really. This is kind of like, this is the idea, a starting template. I'll go back and do it in the proper order now. So yeah, this idea of a half-baked template that you start with. Does anyone need the QR code again, actually? Sorry. Yeah, okay. So half-baked starting template. Things within that template that you can quickly change. So the speed variable and the jump height, they're kind of pulled right to the top. So you can alter those very quickly and make the game your own, just in terms of the movement. And well, we'll find out what else you want to add to it. But one of the things I do is I give people quick cards, allow them to choose from an array of like 10 cards what they want to do. They want to add a countdown, change the movement speed, change the look of their player. So these are already within the code, easy to change. So that's like your starting point. And then once that's kind of been done, then you've got like it's probably about 20, 25 different patterns that have been prepared in terms of supporting resources for how to implement the code to do it has been created, and people can do it in whatever order they want to. Okay, great. Okay, theme. Choose your avatar, yeah. Moving enemies, dynamic movement, gambling, loot box, bigger map. Characters instead of boxes, definitely. Scary birds, yeah. Interactive cutscenes with dialogues. Expensive downloadable content, yeah, of course, you know that. Penguins, yeah. I love Pengu. Pengu is a great game. Nicer icons, make it even slower, yeah. Frustrate those people. Backgrounds, artwork. Okay, so if I was like totally overly ambitious, I would now create names for these 4 sections and try and divide them. If I was to ask you to do that, how would you divide them? Is there a framework? What was that framework before? The one, what was it, ENR? Was it environment, EPR? What was it, environment, relationships? Okay, that doesn't really fit here, does it? Okay. Are there any other? Well, I thought, all right, I better, yeah. There are some that are out there. Here's one that I found from GameStar Mechanic, which is there's a school in New York that kind of had game design as part, and like they used like GameStar and they devised this, and they divided up for like these challenge cards: space, goals, components, mechanics, rules. Now, I don't know if anyone's come across this exact combination, but it probably feels quite familiar. Don't know. Yeah, pretty much. It's a really good way of getting novice game designers or makers used to the kind of game elements that are needed. And it's probably got like kind of similarities to this mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics framework as well. So I thought, well, why not organize these patterns that people that are in there somewhere on some kind of genetic level, probably passed on? Can we organize them in that kind of way? And I came up with something pretty similar. Game mechanics, game polish instead of aesthetics, because it's too long for 9-year-olds. Challenge systems and kind of dynamics, and then game space. I just kind of merged them together. And then organized let's do this full screen. There you go. So that's like a pattern collection that I use. And you can see a lot of the ones that you put up there are kind of there. And so it was developed in response to what people wanted to do. And so the question that the research is now moving towards is, how does this use of a design, a game, all right, so I call it, these are gameplay design patterns. to distinguish them from game programming patterns, because design patterns are also used in a kind of programming sense, in that it's used to sort of teach kind of high-level object-oriented programming. So, but these are more gameplay patterns. They're more the patterns that will be familiar to players through play. So that's the distinction there. There is existing research in this area. There's like a few researchers, but Stefan Bjork and UC Holopain have got like a massive collection of gameplay design patterns and like a series of publications on that. But they're not really aiming at coding or like beginner coders. So this is kind of new work in that way. So in terms of what I did, kind of set up a 360 camera in the middle of the community of families learning to make games. And then you can use the 3D camera to then have what's happening on their screen next to what they're doing. And that's pretty good data, and you get pretty good audio recording of what's happening on their screen. So able to get really granular into what their process is for working through these resources. So a lot to work with there. And then I've pretty much got loads of things to share, but I'm just focusing on how do these learners use game design patterns in this bit of research. So I'm just going to go through. This is the slightly more boring bit. I noticed these game design patterns propagating through the different learners. So someone will implement one, and then like through play testing, that will then spread to other people. Things like hazards in tricky places, like a lava pit, use of moving enemies. Once one person's got one, everyone else wants to copy it. And then also kind of new patterns emerge from peer activity as well. Oh, could you do that? And then sort of new ones come out as well. So these patterns are used as a bit of a language for informal peer feedback, especially if the game's the dynamics are wrong and it feels slow or wrong. You'll get told by your peers to change things around, and it will kind of, they'll use the language of the design patterns to norm people in a more playable direction. Yeah, this idea of wider funds of knowledge. So, yeah, one child comments, oh, it's like parkour in Minecraft, but it's timed. It's like playing Wipeout. Have you ever played Wipeout? People are using their own knowledge to kind of like explain and explore things. And some people, parents might be coders, they share their technical knowledge, they're happy to do that. Other parents are not, and they'll bring their love of art and kind of making or music or just stories, and they'll bring that into it as well. There's choice about what people can, yeah, people are able to choose, and that helps. You can see how the kind of supporting resources can be structured around that collection so that it acts as a way into the collection. Rather than teaching people to code from first principles, there's like a self-contained tutorial that they've chosen to work through as well. So it helps in terms of them navigating the resources. It also helps in terms of as a shortcut lingua franca for ideation and prioritization. So, oh, let's get an enemy in. Oh no, change the background. That was used all the time by people. So that's helpful for them. And also in terms of division of labor, it helps go, oh, you do that pattern, I'll work on this one, or look at that pattern, that's a really complicated one. You better do that, parent, I'll work on this more kind of user-friendly one. It can encourage learners to design for others in terms of imagining that's play testing in general, but it's almost like the small chunks of implementing a pattern and then getting testing, and then the next pattern and testing kind of helps learners to design for others. It also drives emerging technical processes. In order to implement one particular pattern, you might need to use a tool in a particular way, like a graphical tool to do cropping. And people go, oh, how do you do that? When they've implemented a pattern, and then people will peer share these technical processes in that way. And like, yeah, especially children take a lot of pride in learning these technical bits and sharing them with other people. That helps in motivation. And then last but not least, it can help support curricular computing concepts like computational thinking, systems concepts and ideas as well. And then this bit, just skip that bit. So this fits into kind of research that is really pretty much aimed at sharing practice between professionals and researchers, but it's the utility of having like an intermediate level design construct that's not too abstract, maybe like computational thinking concepts, not too concrete like the coding syntax, but somewhere in the middle to help share practice. But I think that's also useful for novices. I think the examples show that this kind of middle ground is useful for novices, which is interesting because that kind of takes you back. So yeah, this idea of swinging between concrete and abstract is very popular in computer science teaching at the moment at schools. I tried experimenting with this. Are people swinging between abstract and concrete concepts? And no, they're not really. It's just one massive blob of stuff that people kind of move from one thing to the next. That seems to be how people are working, which kind of brings you back a little bit to the work of Puppet, which is like, so we're back to the foundational bits here, which is valuing the kind of concrete experience of coders and like, yeah, bricolage as a kind of process that isn't driven by abstract concepts, but it's driven by what's in front of you, piecing things together and put a concrete approach, and we're just valuing that and just letting your learners kind of go for it in that way. And I guess the proposition is that a pattern of collections is a way of helping learners to navigate that. So here's some implications for designers and educators. Too many words, really. So chapter 2 is more about emerging community practice and participant agency, but I only really had time to focus on the one kind of area for that. It's all kind of open source stuff. So I've done it for done it for block languages and also for code languages at the moment. And so there's kind of, I'm really up for doing this at museums or different events, and also sharing the resources with other people who want to give it a go. It's all out there as kind of open source stuff for teachers or researchers to try out. So there's a bit of short link that will take you to those resources to try out.